He's not exaggerating. I listened 24 hours notice for this talk, but I think you will enjoy it. So I don't know about you, but when I was in law school, I loved Magna Carta, and I studied it all the time. But thank you, maybe that was just me. So I'm very honored to be here by the Galveston County Bar Association to speak to you on a topic very near and dear to my heart, which is Magna Carta. We are now on the 800th anniversary of Magna Carta. And can you imagine that? Our country is barely 225 years old, yet this great charter is 8 centuries old. So what is Magna Carta? Well, it literally means Great Charter. This was a document that was issued 800 years ago this June. It involved King John, a very bad king who was very weak, and the people did not like him very much. And there was a revolution. But rather than having a violent, bloody revolution, as is often the case, this was a revolution grounded in law. And rather than just cutting off the king's head, they made the king use his pen to sign a charter of liberties. And when King John affixed his seal, he recognized something that no monarch had ever recognized before, that the king is not above the law, that the king is below the law, that the law is supreme. And that was such a momentous occasion in the history of the world that to this day we celebrate it and treasure it. Now, as a footnote, about 3 weeks after Magna Carta was sealed, the Pope annulled it. He said, doesn't work. No one is above me because I'm the Pope, right? This was Pope Innocent III. But what's interesting is that King John remained a very weak king, and Magna Carta was reissued several times. And over the course of centuries, the English people wove it into their constitution. Well, the Brits have no constitution. We have one, right? It's right here. It's very simple. The Brits have no constitution. But what's interesting about this is the simple fact that they've made Magna Carta their constitution, and so have we. My goal for today is to walk through 8 provisions of Magna Carta. There were 61 articles. I won't bore you with all of them. But I want to focus on 8 provisions of Magna Carta that directly inspired portions of our United States Constitution. Justice Brennan summed it up very well. He said, throughout the history of the United States Supreme Court, the bedrock principles of Magna Carta have and continue to have a profound influence on the justices' deliberation. So I'm glad in the jury box they show you a video about Magna Carta. In every law school in the country, you should be talking about Magna Carta. My students, I promise you, they know about Magna Carta. So let's talk about these provisions, right? The very first article, number 1, similar to our First Amendment perhaps, says, the English church shall be free and shall have its rights undiminished and its liberties impaired. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The very first article recognizing the salience of religious liberty was at the top of Magna Carta. And just 3 years ago, the Supreme Court recognized a decision that controversy between church and state, it's nothing new. Everything going on today, this is nothing new, folks. This happened in 1215 when the very first clause of Magna Carta. The second provision I want to talk about involves taxes. Yes, believe it or not, taxes have always been controversial. Magna Carta said 800 years ago that taxes shall not be imposed on our kingdom unless by the common council. In other words, by the elected branch of government. The king, everyone see Robin Hood, right? The king cannot decide to tax unilaterally. Where is this in our Constitution? Which body imposes taxes? Congress, not the president. And even more specifically, the House of Representatives, the branch closest to the people, they're responsible for imposing taxes. The next provision of Magna Carta that I want to talk about is Article 20. And this involves something which the sheriffs and others may be very familiar with, punishment for crimes. And it says for trivial offenses, a free man shall be fined only in proportion to the degree of his offense, and for a serious offense correspondingly, but not so heavily to deprive him of his livelihood. Here we see the early inclinations that the punishment must fit the crime, which we're all taught, right? You can't execute someone for jaywalking. You can't fine someone indefinitely for a small crime. And this has been very important in our justice system, that you punish someone in proportion to our crime. And in fact, this inspired what we have in our Constitution, the 8th Amendment, which says, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. You cannot fine someone indefinitely when it's a small, trivial crime. And the Supreme Court has recognized this principle, right? The Supreme Court said in a case called Carmona v. Ward, the precept that sanctions should be commensurate with the seriousness of the crime is in both Magna Carta. So the very nature of how judges today sentence defendants traces back 800 years to make sure that the person being punished is being punished in proportion to what they did. Okay? Article 28 of Magna Carta discusses something very important here in Texas, property. It says, no constable shall take corn or other provisions from anyone without immediately tendering money. What does that mean? If the government wants to take your property, they got to pay. That the king cannot seize your property without permission. Where do we have this in our Constitution? The Fifth Amendment, what's become known as the Takings Clause, which says, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. This is a very salient issue today with the issue of eminent domain. Can the government take your property to build a hotel or a convenience store, right? This is an issue that divides us. We see even 800 years ago, the wisdom of Magna Carta was to say, if they take your property, they got to pay you for it. Okay? Article 38 of Magna Carta, with respect to the jury trial, what was mentioned a few moments ago. And the importance of the jury trial is that you cannot be judged by the king, but you're judged by your peers, that your fellow man is the one who's deciding whether you'll be guilty of a crime. And it says, 38, no official shall place a man on trial upon his own supported statement without producing credible witnesses to the truth of it. Think about that. Credible witnesses. This says not only do you get a trial, but you need to have witnesses who are sworn and honest, so that if you're going to go to jail, it's based on a true conviction. Where is this in our legal tradition? The Sixth Amendment. If any criminal defense lawyers here, you should probably know it by heart. But it says, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to be confronted with the witnesses against him, right? Why is this so important? Because if someone's accusing you, you have to look them in the eye and say it to my face. I want to cross-examine you. I want to challenge your accusation. It's very easy to convict someone when there's no witnesses, but when you look someone in the eye, you say, I am accusing you, prove it. And the Supreme Court's recognized this. They've said, by the time of Magna Carta, jury trial had been in existence, and it's deeply woven in our Constitution, a case called Duncan v. Louisiana, 1968.
The next provision
I want to talk about is probably the most important provision of Magna Carta.
I'm sure all of you've heard
Article 39 of Magna Carta. You've read it on a daily basis. Now let me read it to you. It's short. It says, no free man shall be taken or imprisoned or exiled or in any way destroyed, except by the lawful judgment of his peers or the law of the land. Let me say that again. No freeman shall be imprisoned except by the lawful judgment of his peers or by the law of the land. Okay, what does this mean, lawful judgment of his peers? Exactly what it sounds like. They were very good writers back then. Simple, right? If you want to go to jail, the people in your community, not the king, not the judge, determines your guilt. And even to this day in our legal system, in the United States of America, you have the right to trial by jury of your peers. And not just people from anywhere, people from where you live in your area. This was very prominent during the American Revolution, you may recall, right? The King of England would frequently hold trials in England for American citizens. Or if any British were guilty, they hold trials in Britain. That's not a fair trial. So today in the United States, you have the right to a trial by the jury of your peers. But what's this law of the land business, right? You can't be in prison except by the law of the land. This is a very powerful expression, law of the land, which describes that the law is not for the king, but for the country. The law is above the country. The law is for everyone in this country equally. The king is not above the law. And this was such a profound statement that it's very hard to explain how significant this was. And this expression, law of the land, directly impacted our United States Constitution. In the Fifth Amendment, it says, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. What does that mean? If the government wants to take away your property, or your life, or your freedom, they need to give you the process of the law. They need to be above anything impartial, right? They need to be very honest and equally applying the law to everyone, and it can't be based on some sort of individual judgment, but the law of everyone applied equally. And this phrase, due process of law, has been so instrumental in our constitutional system. And decisions going back 200 years, the Supreme Court cited over and over again Magna Carta for this provision of due process of law. But this isn't just process in the sense that you get a trial and you get a jury. No, no, no. The court has said this involves liberty, that there are liberty interests of this due process clause, and that which the government cannot infringe. Okay? So where have we seen this case pop up? Well, one recent example involves Guantanamo Bay, the right of habeas corpus, that if you are captured, you have the right to say to a judge, hey, I'm here unlawfully. The king or the president cannot detain me unlawfully. The very nature that people held at Guantanamo can petition for their right to be released or to see a judge stretches back to Magna Carta. In a case called Boumediene v. Bush, the Supreme Court said, the writ of habeas corpus became the means by which the promise of Magna Carta was fulfilled. So think about this. In one of the most controversial cases of our era involving Guantanamo Bay, how did the judges of the Supreme Court justify their decisions? By going back 800 years to the barrens in the meadows of Runnymede, England, right? Antedating our Constitution by 5 centuries. And the Supreme Court's recognized again and again and again that you cannot deprive someone of their life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. An objective, fair, consistent application. We often hear this expression, the rule of law. What does it mean? Well, it means Magna Carta. The rule of law is a law of rules, consistent application of the law to everyone, and that is the bedrock principle of fairness that we embrace from Magna Carta. Article 40 is a beautiful one. It says, to no one will we sell, to no one delay or deny right or justice. That the courts cannot sell justice, there's no bribing. They will not deny or delay that freedom, right? We have this in our Constitution, the 6th Amendment. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial. Why is this so important? Because you can't just let a guy sit in jail forever. You accuse him of a crime? Good. Give him a trial. Let the jury come in. Let's see if his peers convict him, right? And the Supreme Court has said that this requirement of speedy justice has been part of the American Anglo tradition since times of Magna Carta. So we've always had this sense that the way of fairness in our law is through the Constitution and Magna Carta. Okay? And even recently, in a case decided just a week ago by the United States Supreme Court, this is really current. This involved judicial fundraising, which I'm sure some people in this room are interested in, right? How can judges ask for contributions in various respects? And the Chief Justice said that judges are charged with strict neutrality and independence. And he says, to no one will we, judges, right? To no one will we sell, to no one will we refuse or delay justice. Okay? The last provision of Magna Carta that I want to talk about is Article number 61. And this is the idea of petitioning yourself. We take this for granted, that when the government doesn't like what we do, we can write them a letter. We can make a phone call. We can write an editorial. We can go to City Hall and say, I want to talk to the mayor. And you want to know what? They are public servants and they're going to talk to you. We take that so much for granted, but that wasn't always the case. Before Magna Carta, if the king did something you didn't like, too bad, right? Imagine saying, knock, knock, king, I want to complain. Say, okay, off with your head, right? Alice in Wonderland style. But Magna Carta recognized that when the people petitioned the king for a grievance, the king responded in turn. That the people and the king are not on different levels. In fact, the king is responsive to the people. The mayor, the governor, the sheriff, I don't care what public official, he's responsible ultimately to the people that he serves. And we have this in the very first amendment of our Constitution. No one ever reads this far. They go, oh yeah, free speech, free religion, right. But the last part, that you have the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. Petition the government for redress of grievances, right? What does this mean? If the government makes you mad or makes you angry, you have the right to petition them. They don't have to listen, right? I didn't say they have to listen, right? But you at least have the right to tell them what's on your mind. And if they don't like it, throw the bums out, as they say. And the court has respected this many times. So what does all this mean, right? What's all this Magna Carta talk? Why is this so significant? What does this mean? All stuff about juries and taxes and this and that. Well, I want to give you an example about the rule of law. And this is where the rubber meets the road. I often begin my constitutional law class with this question. Why do people listen to courts? Why do people listen to judges? As Hamilton said in Federal 78, they have neither the sword nor the purse. They can't make anyone do something. If I ignore a judge, what you can do, bang me with her gavel, right? The judge has no independent power. But the reason why people obey courts is because we have this respect for the rule of law, and we know we need this independence in order to protect our freedoms. This doesn't always happen. And there was a very stark moment in the 1960s where this fabric almost broke apart. And I'll use the example of school desegregation. So everyone knows, if you don't, I'm going to tell you now, 1954, 1955, the Supreme Court ruled in a case called Brown v. Board of Education, saying that school desegregation violated the 14th Amendment. Okay? But, surprise, the court didn't say all schools must desegregate now. They didn't say that. They said schools desegregate with, quote, with all deliberate speed. With all deliberate speed, schools desegregate. And this process took 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. This went on and on and on. And as you may imagine, this was met with massive resistance throughout the United States. And one of the most poignant moments involved Little Rock, Arkansas, involving Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. Some of you may know what I'm talking about. So there, the governor of Arkansas refused to have his schools desegregated. And he, at one point, would actually stand and block access to the school to prevent black children from entering the building. A federal judge in Arkansas said, you need to respect the rule of law, right? You need to respect my judgment. And what did the governor say? No, you're wrong. I'm right. You are not interpreting the Constitution correctly. I am. Okay, so what happens here, right? What happens when a governor or a mayor or a president says to the court, no, I'm not going to do it? Is a federal judge going to personally escort those children in past the lynch mob to the school? No. These situations illustrate why the rule of law is so important. So what happened? President Eisenhower sent in the 101st Airborne. The President of the United States, who, by the way, was no big fan of desegregation, this wasn't his thing, right? This was not his issue. But he said, we can't have people disregarding the law. We can't have people disregarding the courts. And he sent in the 101st Airborne to escort those Little Rock 9, those 9 black children, into the building. There's a beautiful picture, you can Google it, I don't have any visuals here, but of these 9 children being marched in by federal troops into a high school in Little Rock, Arkansas. They were ferried right into the principal's office so they wouldn't get lynched. I'm not exaggerating, right? And they stay in the principal's office all day. But the significance of this, of the President of the United States saying no, we cannot have people disregarding the courts. We need to have the equal protection of the law, and we need to have the rule of law. And this was a very poignant moment where we had this almost bending point where had it gone the other way, right? Had that situation gone the other way, where President Eisenhower said, whatever. You have seen governors throughout the South saying, no, I'm not going to do it, not going to do it, not going to do it. And where would we be today? This traces back to Magna Carta. No one is above the law. No governor, no mayor, no president is above the law. And it's so important that we as attorneys, the guardians of our liberties, are at the forefront of protecting these freedoms for everyone. And we have a very important job and role to do so. Okay? And with that, I thank you very much and hope you all have a chance to read the Magna Carta. Thank you so much.